And now they can hear us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next segment here. We're running a little bit behind, but don't worry. We are still going to get the full time here in the Destruction AllStars Q&A. My name is Lena Bashinsky, and I'm delighted to be here with Holly Newsham and Matt Lake of Lucid Games. Why don't you guys kick it off and give us an intro? Tell us a bit about you.
So, hi, I'm Holly Newsham, Senior Animator at Lucid Games. My talk was about the character creation process on Destruction AllStars. I also took us through a bit of a journey through my 4 years and the lessons I learned and stuff to sort of have a bit of importance on your mental health and things like that. So that was it. Matt?
Hi, I'm Matthew Lake, technical animator at Lucid Games on Destruction AllStars. My talk was covering kind of our technical animation process and how shoulder pads are never a good idea. And just some of the real-time rigging and kind of automated pipelines that we set up for to release the game.
Wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. Both of your talks were incredible. If you're in the chat and you haven't watched them, you can see Moobot is linking both to their Twitters, and you can check out their full sessions on the Animation Exchange YouTube. But our first question here, I believe, is for Matt. Actually, both of you, can you talk a little bit more about what it was like to work across multiple different animation softwares? What was your biggest hurdle in getting that pipeline set up?
I think working across the 3 different packages that we supported, so Maya, Mobu, and Max, kind of played to the makeup of our team. So like coming into Lucid, myself and Christian had only used Max and Mobu. I know Christian had used it his entire career, and I'd only used them in university. I know Holly and Mike and the rest of Lucid used Maya. But coming in, we all kind of just Holly was on a different project, so it was only really me and Christian to support. So we did end up just supporting 3ds Max for kind of the prototyping process. So the first 18 months of the game was entirely 3ds Max supported for animation. And alongside that, we used it to kind of develop our toolkits and R&D, what we wanted, our like custom rig and Maya and just the kind of toolkit that we wanted for that. So we built it along slowly and learned Maya in parallel to it. And then later on, well, it wasn't that long until Holly joined on the project, and then we supported Motion Builder, which is a little bit more easier. But yeah, it kind of played to our strengths. Like I say, me and Christian just focused on Max, and then when we needed to, then supported the animation team as a whole. I think the biggest sort of hurdle with it was time doing the same thing multiple times. Like you've got to make the same export tool in 3 different packages. You got to make a transfer tool in every package. So it is repetitive, but it ultimately kind of empowers animators to play to their strengths if they prefer one software or not. But yeah, the retargeting was our biggest hurdle because, like in 3ds Max, you're not animating on you're animating with biped, but biped strapped to our rig that we've made in Maya. So you can't just import the FBX data straight into Max on that front. You have to bring it onto the biped, so then you can animate that and manipulate it. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to put animation data into a Mobu custom rig, but then we have to make another transfer tool for Maya as well. I think that was my biggest issue anyway.
And what was that like for you as an animator, Holly? Was it challenging or just super easy, where you're just fundamentally talking about principles and less about like exactly specific solutions with specific tools?
Yeah, I'm like all hail the tools. Matt and Mike and Darren, they made the tools so it didn't even matter where we were. It felt the same. So bringing like sort of Max tools into Maya, I know helped Christian. He was like, oh yeah. But yeah, and then also the ease of having the transfer tool, taking stuff from Motion Builder into Maya, it's seamless. So the things like posing fingers that can be really like a big pain in Motion Builder, and the face rig is only in Maya. That sort of stuff's like, oh, okay, instead of having a headache in Motion Builder and saving poses and trying to do that, you just bring it into Maya and then do all the nice things there. But sometimes like Motion Builder is easier to, put clips together and things like that. Maya can be a bit of a pain. So you can play to the strengths of everything, and the tools make it so you don't even notice where you are. It's all easy.
That seemed to happen quite a bit, where a specific software was used to its strength, like you said about putting clips together in Motion Builder, then you can go over to Maya and get the real finesse and like really high quality on that side.
That's awesome. My jaw hit the floor when I saw that was capable, because what I would not have given early in my career to just work in Maya. Holly, a question from earlier today was, what sorts of lessons did you carry with you coming from your small project that you mentioned onto something as robust as Destruction AllStars? What was the most surprising thing you learned coming from the small project onto one with a full team? So we can start with the first one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the main difference was obviously having a team. So with the other project, have to be careful to not say the name. It was just whatever I thought, which is cool, but it's nice to have feedback, and it really taught me the importance of feedback and having other people to bounce ideas off of and tell you like whether there's something better to do, or pushing stuff, or even putting the systems together. I didn't have much of an idea, so we did what we could, and it worked. But yeah, it's different when you have people on your team that have more experience and stuff like that, where you can just get another opinion. That was definitely the big difference between it. What was the second part of that question?
I muted myself for the chat for that. What was the most surprising thing? What sort of caught you off guard for that?
It's sort of the same, really. It was just nice to have the support of a team where you have someone to talk to, and it's not just you on your own, sort of swimming in a deep lake. Yeah.
A deep lake. Matthew Lake. I'm sorry. Okay. Earlier, Riley in the chat asked a question from Mr. Matt Lake. The Python tools you've built sound very interesting. How did you find working with Unreal's Python support? Was everything you needed already there, or were there any limitations?
It was actually quite a challenge, to be honest. Hit the ground running with kind of when it came out, just jumped straight onto it. But there was very little support on it. Like stuff like Maya's been around for years, so there's lots of resources out there, like thousands of pages of kind of examples, and if you get stuck. Whereas Unreal, there's not that much, so when you hit a brick wall, you just kind of have to suffer quietly. But did get there in the end, and there wasn't everything I needed when I was doing the cinematic pipeline. There was the ability to spawn a camera. So in Sequencer and Unreal, there's two types of cameras. There's a possessable camera and a spawnable camera. And Python, you couldn't make spawnable cameras, and we needed that for our cinematic pipeline. Fortunately, there's UDN and stuff like that, so I actually spoke to the engine developers, and they were awesome enough to add it into the game, which then I used that example code that they put in. So which was really nice of them. It's nice to have that kind of like communication with the people making the software that you're working in, that can get features like that added in. Because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to automate a big portion of the cinematics.
Watching Holly talk about animating Pink was awesome, especially since you relate to her personally, or to her personality. But can you expand a bit on how you might animate a character who you have nothing in common with?
Yeah, so it's definitely tougher when you can't connect as well with a character. But YouTube obviously is always a good place to start and do everything in. It's good that we have the internet, because it's all there, sort of thing. It's just starting somewhere, and obviously talking to people. That's a really nice plus to. There's lots of nice pluses to being in the office, but a really good thing is the array of people that you have in an office. So you could go and ask anybody. It's not like, I'm animating this character, has to be just what I like, the stretch of my knowledge. It can be like anyone can give you an idea, or just tell you something that you don't know, because I do not know a lot. Especially because I for Xander, for instance, he was completely the opposite of Pink and the opposite of me, and I had no idea what I was doing. It was with his personality, because he was all moshing and super dark, and it's just not me. But there were guys around me that love listening to heavy metal music and going to gigs and hitting each other and Ring of Death and stuff like that. I was like, oh. But
each other.
I don't know what they get out of that. But yeah, so it's nice to, yeah, you just ask people and look on the internet. It's fine.
There was a follow-up question. What did you learn from directing motion capture on your first shoot?
I mean, I have loads. I touched on a couple in my talk, but big thing, which is sort of a general thing, is because obviously it is super scary, and it's scary when someone says, "Do you want to do that?" Especially when you've never done it. But the biggest thing for me is like, if you don't do something, regretting it. So it's like, as scary as it is and stuff like that, it's like just do it, because like to come away afterwards and be like, oh, I really contributed to that. And when you're working with the data, you know exactly when that happened and you know why it happened. It gives you a lot more context when you're working with it. Yeah, and you just come away feeling really fulfilled. And it does wonders for your confidence.
While I didn't direct on any of the shoots, coming from university, we did some mocap stuff, and watching them two direct, the biggest thing I kind of learned from watching them was kind of be collaborative. When I was doing shoots in uni and stuff, I was like doing locomotion, like, right, you need to hit this mark, hit this mark, hit this mark, and it's very super scripted. But when they were collaborating with the actors and actresses, like they were getting like much better things than just very hard metric stuff. Oh, that was a nice thing to see.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize that there'd be such like a close tie. I always pictured like just animators in like a thespian space. I've never directed mocap or been around mocap almost at all, so I'm always like, tell me of that world.
I mean, I want to see that. I want to see you in a thespian space.
I don't know if anybody wants to see me in a thespian space. Maybe the last hour and a half.
It'll probably work.
So, Matt, you mentioned some tools like the hotkey importer became obsolete in COVID. Did working across multiple DCCs make the transition to work from home more challenging as well?
I think we were quite prepared for it, to be honest. Well, they're not prepared for the pandemic, but in terms of toolkit, we didn't really add any new tools. Like I said, the hotkey loader became obsolete, so there was tools that we didn't use as frequently because there was stuff that benefited us in person. But I don't think we created any newer ones to work from home. Like I say, working for Steamroller, we were always in this kind of one-to-one camera relationship, so on a social aspect for meetings and stuff. So that was we were prepared in that sense. But I don't think so on a tool front.
So then there's another question for you. How did you do the draw face for the cat face rig?
Is that the Pink's Twinkle Riot's face?
I imagine so.
Yeah. So on the helmet, it's basically 3 UV shells. So there's each eye and a mouth, and basically there's 2 float values, well, integer values per eye, which is basically an X and a Y for each one, and it's basically swapping a tileable texture with a sprite sheet even. Sorry. So it does scale as well. So the whole system, I made it set up so Holly could add more rows and columns, so she could keep adding more faces in it. And you basically just change the divide value of that sprite sheet, and she can add in as many as she wanted or as little as she wanted. But yeah, so it's just 3 separate it's 2 textures. So the eyes are the same one and a mouth one, and then X and Y, and then yeah. So there is a nicer tool, so they don't have to animate the float values directly. They've got a nice little picker and stuff.
And all the values, would they just sort of like what was it like animating with sort of the sprites of the face almost?
Yeah, so I made there was kind of like a picker where you had both sprite sheets, and then it was laid out kind of like Pink's face, where you had each eye up here, and it was just every sprite that you could pick from, and then when you picked it, it kind of highlighted it, and then you could change like the hue and the brightness and things like that as well. And there's even ability to put an animation on there, but we don't do that. I don't think.
So when it comes to like actually figuring out what those expression sheets look like, did you have certain animations in mind, Holly, where you're like, I need her to do this, I need this face, and then your desire for what she was going to do in her kit drove the expressions that were there? Or was it like, here's all the expressions we have drawn out, and then you were inspired by those to create the animations you did? What was the process like between those two?
Yeah, it was sort of similar to most characters, where she needed a spread of expression. not just happy, although that is like a real regular for her. She needed to go from like, you know, super rage monster to like really sprightly. And so I needed to, so I had inspiration from a lot of different animes and kawaii cartoons and things, because I really wanted that to come through. So I was just inspired by those really, and I had to draw them myself, which was daunting, but it went well. But I sort of made the decision at the beginning to be like, these are the ones that I'm going to use. Let's get as much as I can now. I don't want to keep going back to it, because I'll just keep changing it forever and tweaking it and being like, oh, well, yeah, I can just, you know, add that. That's fine. I needed to set myself limitations, because I would have just been always adding stuff. Go on.
So you mentioned that you worked with...
Don't mind that.
You mentioned that you'd worked with Steamroller. What was the process like working with a studio in another time zone?
We just had super late meetings on this side. So
it isn't that much of a difference, because it's at 4 o'clock on Tuesdays when we call them, which isn't too like 8 p.m. So that was good.
So they have it at 11 a.m. So they come in the morning, have morning meetings when we're about to leave the office.
And so the work they were doing, were they quite integrated, where they would have work that was sort of interspersed throughout what you were doing? Or was it like, okay, we know that Steamroller is going to deal with this chunk, so then we're dealing with all this, and this is sort of living in its own Steamroller bubble?
It was a little bit of both, to be fair. They were more like an extension of our team, like as if they were all employees of Lucid type of thing. But there obviously is some segments of that where you can just give them as a big chunk, which are easier to kind of take complete ownership over. But there's things obviously like the locomotion and stuff where there is that kind of back and forth relationship. We couldn't give them the engine for a long time because of working on a PS5 and we weren't allowed. So we obviously had to have that kind of relationship where we would integrate the work and make sure we didn't block them, and if there was any errors, it was caught really fast rather than just getting lost in like a per-force submission abyss.
Beautiful. So we got another question for Holly from Riley in the chat. It's obvious Twinkle Riot is your favorite character. Who was your least favorite character to work on?
So I touched on it a little bit before. Xandar was my least favorite. I still enjoyed working on him because he was so completely different. The three characters that I mostly worked on, my main people, were Genesis, Twinkle Riot, and Xandar. So Genesis was she was similar in ways to Twinkle Riot, like girly and fun, whereas Xandar was just completely the opposite. So it was tougher. So in that sense, it was my least favorite, but it was refreshing as well to be like completely different subject matter, and I learned about mosh pits, so valuable knowledge.
So the one thing, excuse me, Matt, you mentioned it in your talk where this was like your first time going through an entire dev cycle, and Holly, you actually mentioned like your whole Trent, like this roller coaster ride that you had. You're like, here's what happened to me in the last 4 years. So both of you sort of gone through like these big cycles. Holly, you're now a senior animator. Like, that's amazing. I know you both like touched on your takeaways in your talks, but I'd be very interested to hear from you, Holly, how you felt like you've grown. I would be very interested to hear from both of you how you felt like you've grown over this process, specifically for Holly, how you feel like you've grown from when you first started to now being a senior animator, and what the difference between where you were at the beginning of this versus where you are now. What's the difference between those two states of your existence for both of you?
Well, I think I'm definitely a little bit more, I want to say chill, but like confident, but like not that either. Confident in my decisions, I suppose. I understand the pipeline. I understand it all, like, because I've been there for it. So it's not like completely daunting, this mystery thing. There's still a lot that I don't know, but I'm more sort of confident in knowing what I need to do. Maybe not like completely in carrying it out, but I know like where I am with when I'm animating. I know that you should stay in blocking forever, and things like that, where I used to just panic and be like, oh, I need to get this done. I'm taking too long, and it never worked really. But and sort of the confidence in taking time for my mental health and stuff like that, and not stressing myself out and putting the priority in that. It's lots that you can't even describe as well, but it's a nice headspace to be in.
For myself, I think of coming out of uni, and walk through the doors, you think that you know everything, and then you find out, oh wait, actually you don't. I think that's the biggest thing, that there's a whole world of absolutely everything that to still know. Do you know what I mean? And if you don't know it, it's nice to have that kind of challenge to go find out the answers and things like that. I always used to be kind of terrified with, oh, I don't know how to do that. Should I even bother trying, or things like that? But it's nice to learn and things like that. Like whereas I think I used to be a little bit more cautious on that front. But the thirst for knowledge has grown really over the past couple of years. Yeah,
it's great. I'm so
it's
sorry.
not as scary to not know. I think that's like the big thing. It's like I used to always think that I'd be questions. No one's gonna think that I just don't know anything and that I'm gonna get fired.
Yeah. There's not that pressure of feeling like if I don't have the answers, it's bad. Like you're refining your skills not just as your craft, but in like confident that you can learn, and if you don't know it, you will find the answer. Love it.
And you always have that horror period joining, and then you're surrounded by all these industry veterans. Like they say in my talk, Mike Watworth has been doing this for longer than I've been alive. So like being next to that's kind of a scary thing. And then you realize, oh, actually you don't know anything at all. And then you go through that whole imposter syndrome kind of mentality. And
yeah, but then you get like these people who have been in the industry for as longer than you've been alive, and then you come in with this talent and you're like kicking the door down, and they're sweating too. So it's great. Do you have any advice for animators? This is probably our last question. Do you have any advice for animators who are learning to work with Mocap, or who might be nervous about how to use it?
I mean, it's always scary at first. I feel like I said that about everything. Everything's scary, but it's not. When you look at like, and there's a key on every frame, that is very sort of, but I mean, there's a bunch of really cool talks on those sorts of things, like layers of your friends, and you can always undo and just sort of jump in. But also, I don't know, it's a hard one because it just takes practice, and you'll get more confident with sort of how scary all those frames look like. But concentrating on like cool posing, as always, it's like the animator thing. It's always the way, and layers.
Yeah, I'd say give Motion Builder a try. Although it's very different way of working. It's very, very good for motion capture and manipulating it and working with it. Because like I said, it's just dense data, and but it's always dense data. Even when you put layers on, then you bake it down. No matter how much cleanup you do, it will always just go back into dense data. So it's a really, I give that a try. I'd say that's a nice way to work.
And we actually do have one more question here from Matt. When it came to the mocap shoots, did you have to learn on the fly, or were you able to prepare when it came to something like the AR camera?
That was a little bit of learning on the fly. We did try out some prototyping stuff beforehand, so we sent some files over, and we were kind of preliminary, kind of trying to stream it in at home with fake data. But yeah, it was all mostly, it didn't work the first time, and it did get better over the course of the 3 shoots. It took us, I think, a day to set up the first time, and then by the third shoot, it was up and running in like 20 minutes. So it does get better every time, and we messed around with silly things, like there was like laser beams and disco lights and stuff like that. Yeah, explosions when people were like doing dodges from impacts and things like that. But yeah, no, it was a collaborative effort. But I think that the integration as well in I think 4.2.6 it's like really easy to set up that stuff now, whereas I think we were on like 4.2.3 or something. It was a little bit more difficult to work with. But yeah, it just got better as we did it more.
We got one more final statement here from looks like a Christian Jadchuk. Not a question, but tell my team that they are ace and I love them. Taught an old dog new tricks. And with that, do you guys want to tell the world where they can find you online? If they want to ask you more questions or perhaps just keep track of your wonderful careers.
Yeah, I guess you can find me on Twitter at MattLakeTA or my website, MatthewLake.net. Yeah, just slide in my DMs. They're all open.
As if you just said that. I'm on Twitter too, at Holly Noosh. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much. Your work is incredible. Your talks are amazing. Once again, if you have not watched them yet, you are robbing yourself of some prime information. They are up on the Animation Exchange YouTube channel right now. Holly, Matthew, thank you.
Thank you
We'll
for having
see
us.
you. Yeah, we'll see you up next for a talk with Amanda Renfro.
Oh, very excited.
All right.